everybody, it's Mrs. Leach, and today we're going to be talking about figurative language. So, figurative language, we need to think about two things. One is, what is it? And the other thing is, why is it there? So, the state asks us to describe how the author's use of figurative language, such as metaphor and personification, achieves specific purposes. So, what is it? And what purpose does it have in the writing? So we're going to talk about that today. First thing I want us to do is reflect a little bit. And you may have seen one of these when you were a little kid. It plays music. And so I want you to kind of think about what adjectives or describing words would you use to describe this glockenspiel? That's the name of it, glockenspiel. So I thought about it, and I would choose loud, fun, and colorful, right? All three of those words would describe this glockenspiel. And on your handout, you can jot down other words if you'd like, but you can jot down these if you're not sure what else to put. Next, let's think about this plant. What adjectives would you use to describe this plant? You may want to pause the video and jot that down right now. And what about this award? What adjectives would you use to describe this award? I want you to take a second, pause the video, and jot down a few adjectives to describe it. What about this child? What adjectives would you use to describe Baby Yoda? Pause the video and fill it in on your graphic organizer. And last, what adjectives would you use to describe these cookies? Go ahead and pause and put it in your graphic organizer. Okay, now that we've kind of jotted down what adjectives would describe each one of those things, I want you to think about the photos. So think about the plant, the award, Baby Yoda, and the cookies. And you can think about the glockenspiel too, but I want you to think about what photo is most like you. So for example, I said that I'm like the glockenspiel because I'm loud and fun. So thinking about the adjectives you picked for those objects, what would you say about yourself? Go ahead and jot that down in your graphic organizer. And the reason I asked you to do that is because it's a way for us to think about figurative language. Figurative language is a description that compares something to something else. And so what we just did was compare ourselves to objects. Why do authors use figurative language? Well, describing a concept by comparing it to something vivid or familiar creates instant pictures in the mind of readers, and it helps in the understanding of the text. So the author is either using figurative language to help you picture something in your head, or the author uses figurative language to help you understand something that the author thinks you might not get otherwise. So what are some examples? I know you've seen some of these before. So a metaphor is when you compare something not using like or as. So for example, the sun was a weapon destroying the earth. In a simile, you make a comparison using like or as. The sun was like a weapon destroying the earth. And personification is when you give human qualities to non-human things. For example, the sun crawled across the land, right? The sun doesn't really crawl, babies do, some animals do. So in all of these examples of figurative language, we were comparing the sun to something else to communicate, to make it easier for you to see. So let's think about this. You do need your handout, and we're going to be talking about comparisons. So in this text, moss and ferns, vines and orchids hang from branches like the beards of wise wizards. We have to think about what is being compared to what. So in this example, we have moss and ferns, vines and orchids hang from the branches like, there's that like that tells me it's a simile, the beards of wise wizards. So I would say that these plants are being compared to the beards of wizards. And in my graphic organizer, I might fill it in like this. I've got my text here. I know that it's a simile because it's a comparison using the word like. What's being compared to what? plants are being compared to wizards. So, what are the qualities of wizards? Well, they're wise, and it says that right there. They're really smart and wise. And they're also really serious. And so, when I think about what the author might be trying to communicate by making that comparison, the author helps us picture the tree, right? We can picture the plants hanging down and looking like beards, but it also gives the sentence a serious feeling or a serious mood. So, those are the two things the author is doing with that figurative language. Let's think about this one. What's being compared to what? His face was frozen like ice. What's being compared to what? I would like you to pause, think, and fill in your graphic organizer. So in this one, we know his face was frozen like ice. That should give you a hint to identify the type of figurative language. You should be able to come up with what's being compared to what. His face is like ice. What are the qualities of ice? Well, ice is cold and harsh. And so what the author might be trying to communicate here is something like this, like somebody's face is totally still, possibly looking cold, and it's probably not a very positive thing that they're trying to communicate. What about this? What's being compared to what? May sat there, grinning, a great sunflower of a woman. What's being compared to what? Pause your video and jot. So in this one, we've got our text, May sat there, a great sunflower of a woman. Think about what type of figurative language it might be. Does it use like or as? Is something human being given human qualities? Or is it just a comparison without using like or as? What's being compared to what? And what are the qualities of that thing? What do you think the author is trying to communicate? Go ahead, pause the video, and fill in your graphic organizer. I'm not going to give you the answer on this one, but I am for this, so let's talk about it. So here's a whole big chunk of text. In the sky, in the gray sky, a red sun. I'm going to start over. Even teachers mess up when they're reading out loud sometimes. That's okay. Let's try it again. In the gray sky, a red sun appeared, a dim red circle that gave a little light like dusk. But the dust came in so thinly that it could not be seen in the air, and it settled like pollen on the chairs and tables, on the dishes. In the morning, the dust hung like fog, and the sun was as red as ripe new blood. Whoa. I highlighted the figurative language in this passage, and I gave you a picture to help you visualize, but the author is giving us these similes and metaphors, or really just similes, in order to help us visualize as well. So let's look at how I might fill this in. So I've got my text here, and the figurative language is mostly similes. So we have like dust, and it settled like pollen. So there's another comparison using the word like. And down here, the sun was as red as ripe new blood. So I know those are similes because they're using like or as and as. And what's being compared to what? Well, the dust gets compared to pollen, and it gets compared to fog. And then the daytime sun is being compared to the setting sun. Dusk is when the sun goes down. And it's also being compared to blood. That's kind of dark. So what are the qualities here? Well, pollen is really irritating. And if you have allergies, then you know that. It's hard to go outside for us people with allergies in May and June, and even sometimes in the fall, because all the pollen makes us cough and sneeze and make kind of really disgusting noises. Pollen's really irritating. Fog can make it hard to see, and it can be really dangerous, especially if you have to drive or go somewhere. The setting sun makes things dark, and then blood kind of, when we think about new blood, there's like a danger there, a violence there. And you can see when I was filling this in, I didn't really use complete sentences. I didn't worry about punctuation. This is just a place to capture your thoughts. It doesn't have to be perfect or paragraphs or anything like that. And so what do I think the author's trying to communicate here? Well, the dust cloud is bad. It's dangerous. This is a hint to me that, as I read, that whatever is going on with this dust is not going to be a good thing. And so that just helps me understand the potential conflict of this text, this story. This is just a little part of the story. You don't have to overthink it. The dust cloud is bad is enough. So that's kind of the deal. Figurative language helps us create imagery, but it also creates mood. And so here I am thinking about that dust cloud because it did seem really bad. And what you're going to be doing next is analyzing one more piece of text on your graphic organizer, and then we're going to move into practicing with some figurative language in a poem. And so I'm looking forward to that, and I hope you are. Happy reading.